Welcome everybody. Be getting started in just a minute.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay.
Welcome everybody on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. My name is Michael Morgenstern and I'm an educator at the museum. And this afternoon, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Michele Rodri, a Holocaust survivor from France, who will share her story with you. Before we begin, I would like to share a few quick words about the museum. Holocaust Museum LA was founded in the early 1960s by a group of Holocaust survivors who wanted to make sure the future generations would always remember this history, and their mission was always to commemorate, educate, and inspire. They did this at a time in the early 1960s when most people were not yet ready to face this tragic history. But thanks to their courage and their foresight, we now have our museum, which was the first and oldest Holocaust survivor founded a museum in the United States. And we fulfill this mission on a regular basis. And we cannot fulfill our mission without our survivor community who is active with our museum, and our survivor community helps to share these stories, their personal stories, on a regular basis with groups, particularly with students. This afternoon, I'm honored to welcome Michele Rodri, who will be sharing her story with you. Michele has been sharing her story at the museum for many years and has spoken to countless number of students and participated in so many of our educational programs. And it's such an honor to welcome her this afternoon to share her story with you. Those watching on Facebook can type in questions at the end in the comments, and those on Zoom can use the Q&A feature, and afterwards, Michele will answer as many questions as possible. Thank you so much again, Michele, for joining us today and for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Am I on now?
Yes, you may begin.
Okay. I was born in Paris, France, into a family of Orthodox. My parents were Orthodox Jews. We were 3 brothers and myself, 4 children. I was the youngest one. There was a big gap between myself and my oldest brother. There were 15 years difference, 14 years difference. And the values that my parents gave to us, but I'll speak for myself, the values that my parents gave to me, I carried through my whole life. I still live by the values that they taught me. And it was a very loving family. We had a very large family before the war. My father came from 6 brothers, so consequently, they had their own families. And my mother came from 3 sisters and a brother, so 4 children also with their families. So before the war, we had all the holidays with lots of people in our home. And everybody gathered mostly in our home because of different reasons. First of all, my mother was the best cook, and her sister, my mother's sister, my aunt, was the best baker. So the combination was always very much appreciated by the whole family. And we were a very close-knit family. And then the war broke out, and my youngest brother, Maurice, was 17 years old, and he was going to school. Instead of taking just a walk to go to school, it started to rain, so he took the subway, and that was not a very good day. When he got into the subway, the Nazis were there, and they had a razzia, and they asked everybody to show their identification cards, and also on our clothing, we were forced to wear a Star of David, which was a yellow star, and it said across the star, Jew. So we had to wear that on our clothing. So of course he was identified immediately as a Jewish boy of 17, and he with other people were taking off the train, the subway, and they were taking him away. And my brother perished in Auschwitz, in the concentration camp, at the age of 17. I think about him every day. I can never forget him, and I can never forget the fact that he has not, it was a wasted life. He had never gone out with a girl besides members of our family. He probably never kissed a girl in his life because, you know, we had certain restrictions as observant Jews. And he was extremely intelligent and very talented in different ways in mathematics and in science, already at 17. And I feel that it was a wasted life because I am grateful, so grateful to have a wonderful grandson who is going to be 23, who had all the electronics and all the beautiful things that we could give him to have a beautiful youth and enjoy life at 17 and so forth up to now. And it was just wasted. Among our family, we lost 80 people. And for Passover, the last Passover before the war broke out, we had the house full with people. And the next Passover, after the war was over, we were 5 people at the table. So fast forward, I was 7.5 years old when I was picked up in front of our house. I was playing in front of our house with 3 of my friends who were not Jewish, from school, friends from school who were playing hopscotch, and suddenly all of a truck stopped on the corner of the street of our home, and two German officers came over and checked my clothing and checked my 3 friends' clothing, and I was the only one, of course, wearing a Star of David, so I was picked up. I was thrown into this truck, and when I say thrown in, they just picked me up at 7.5. I was not very big, I was thin. They threw me into the truck, and my life changed from this time. 20 minutes before that, I had breakfast with my father and mother in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, my life changed completely. I was thrown into this truck with people with their heads down, 2 children, and the rest of it were adults. And we were just packed next to each other. And I was in shock. I didn't know what was happening. The truck took us to Drancy, which is a triage camp. It's a selection camp. From that camp, the Germans used to come in the morning and check who is going to be transported to Auschwitz or Buchenwald or Birkenwald or any of the concentration camps. I grew up very quickly at this time because I saw that the people that were picked up mostly were from the people who were in the front of the room, sitting or laying down in front of the room. So I made sure that I was always in the back of the room. And consequently, I was not picked up to go to a concentration camp. And then a miracle happened, absolutely. My oldest brother, who was with my second brother in the French underground in the FFI, which was under the direction of General de Gaulle, who became the president of France after the war. They were in the underground, and my oldest brother walked in a German uniform. But I have to state also that my mother was a linguist, and she would teach us different languages, and she taught us also to speak German, because at one point where she was born in Poland, the government changed and became Austria. So everybody had to learn German. And my brother spoke a fluent German, so did I, but my oldest brother spoke a perfect German, what was called Hochdeutsch. And he walked in dressed in a German uniform. And he walked straight up to me with one of the German soldiers. And he looked at me and I looked at him like I didn't know him. I don't know why I didn't run to him or say something, but I understood that I shouldn't identify him. And I understood that he was in danger as well as I was. So it was like, many times I think about that moment, it was like I saw a film in front of me to see my brother walk in. My first instinct was to go to him and hug him, but I knew I shouldn't have done that, so I didn't. Anyway, he ordered around the officer, a German officer, or maybe he wasn't an officer, I can't recall. And he said to him in a very imperative way, he said, I want these two children. There was another little girl standing next to me. I want these two children to come with me immediately, and in German. And the other men saluted my brother and let us out. And we went out to the car. My brother had a car, an official car. And we got into the car, and the irony is that the officer saluted my brother and said, thank you so much for coming. That was really ironic. We drove away. My brother didn't talk to me for maybe 100 kilometers. I don't know. I think he was just shocked that he pulled it off. And I was sitting in the back with that little girl. That little girl was not a Jewish child. She was the daughter of a political prisoner. And her husband later on, her father later on was shot because he was against the regime of Hitler. And she was there as a prisoner. She was 4.5, or maybe 5.5 she was. No, she was 5.5. She was 5.5 years old, not knowing what was going on. That poor child came with me and spent the rest of the war with me. My brother took us to a convent. He turned around, first of all, during the travel. We went to the center of France, below Grenoble, in a convent. And he turned around to me and he hugged me and he said to me, I'm going to take you to safety. Everything's going to be okay. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And he took us both to the convent. We arrived at the convent, and this wonderful, heavy-set beautiful face woman came to greet us, and she was the Mother Superior. And she took care of me during the whole time that I was there. She said, she took me aside and she says to me, nobody is to know that you are Jewish. I will be the only one to know. And when you speak to the other children, because there were a lot of children there, she says, you don't talk about your family or anything, not to betray your identity. So I did. I did listen to her. She was wonderful. And she took me every day to school outside of the convent. My little friend Nicole stayed in the school because she was a Catholic girl, a Christian faith, and she was in the school with the other children. But the nun took me, the Mother Superior took me to the regular school outside of the convent. She took me every morning and picked me up in the afternoon after school. I ate lunch there in school, but I never made friends because I was afraid to betray my identity. So I became the best student in the class because I concentrated in the studies that we had. And she used to pick me up, and on the way home, she always brought me a cookie or something. She was just a wonderful human being. Went back to the convent, and I had a very nice voice when I was a child. Today, if I sing, it would rain. So, but at the time, I had a very nice voice, so I became involved in the choir. And I used to sing all the hymns and the Ave Maria and all that. And I was really happy doing this. I was there for 13 months. After 13 months, there was a problem that there was a rumor that the Germans were looking around to find Jewish children that were hiding in religious institutions like churches and convents and things like this. So I was taken away from there. All this through my oldest brother, who arranged everything, I found out afterwards. And I was taken into a family who my father paid a lot of money for, but I took my friend with me. Nicole came with me, and my father paid for her and for me because my brother probably set it up. I can't remember the details of it. But I was there in that home. Some French families really wanted to save Jewish children out of the goodness of their heart. But so they did it for the good reason. And some people were just anti-Semitic and did it for the money. This particular person was very anti-Semitic. Not to say that everyone who did hide children for money were anti-Semitic, but this particular family was. And I was very badly treated. I was hit with a baton on my neck if I did something wrong. And what could I do wrong at my age? I was just not even 9 years old at the time. But anyway, I remained there until one day, I think it was 14 or 15 months, about that. I was away from my parents for 3 years. And then one day, the Prime Minister of England, Churchill, Winston Churchill, said, well, we were having lunch, that he was very, very much against Hitler, and he was saying in a sarcastic way, Mr. Hitler had to capitulate. The American troops are on the outskirts of Paris to liberate France. And at that moment, I remember I had such a chill in my back. I remembered things that were going through my mind. I finally going to be free, and maybe I'll see my parents and my family. And just a few days later, about 3 days later, I think it was, my parents came to pick me up. And with Nicole, And we drove up on the Champs-Élysées, which is the most beautiful avenue of Paris. And I remember seeing the American flags draped with the French flags on the building. When we did go to the camp, out of the triage camp, when I was taken away from the triage camp, driving down, I saw on the Champs-Élysées, I saw the red big drapes the buildings were draped with red and the big black swastika on it. On the buildings of my country, and I felt at that time that it was a total rape. How dare anyone comes into my country and does that? As a child, I was really upset. And then fast forward when we came back after the war and I saw the American flag and the French flag draped over all the buildings and on the Arc de Triomphe and all that, it was mesmerizing for me. It was wonderful. And we came home and I was looking for my brother Maurice because he was the youngest of the three brothers and the closest in age with me. He used to play hide and seek all the time with me. So I was looking all over the house for him. I didn't know what happened. And until this day, I don't know. I don't remember. I blocked it out probably out of my head, that how my parents told me that he was gone and that he passed away in Auschwitz. They got a certificate saying that he was killed in Auschwitz. So my life started again. I went back to school and I met my three friends. Again, and life started in a different way because we missed a lot of our friends and family mostly. But life was pretty good. I went to school and then I went to high school and then I went to the college, and then my middle brother David came to America because he thought he was a very good dancer and he thought that perhaps Hollywood was waiting for him. Well, he was disappointed. Hollywood was not waiting for him, but he lived in this country for 10 years. So while he was living here and he liked it here so much, he went back to France and asked my father if he could take me to the States to visit California. And my father authorized me to come. And I never went back. I went back to France to see my family, of course, but I fell in love and got married. And I didn't continue my studies because I became a mother after a couple of years. And I thought that I wanted to do the best job that I could raising my son, which I'm grateful that I did it that way. And I lived in this country ever since 1956. And I'm an American citizen, and I am a good American citizen. I complain like every American does, and I am happy to be living here. I love this country. And I have a beautiful family. I married a man who coincidentally was a survivor also. He was from Holland. He passed away 17 years ago. We were married for 47 years, and we have a beautiful son, and I have a beautiful daughter-in-law, but she's like my own daughter, and a wonderful grandson. And my life is here. And I just love it here. So I don't think I missed anything. Maybe if I missed something, maybe Michael can remind me, but I don't think I missed anything. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Michele, for sharing your story with us. Again, if anybody has questions, we do have time to go through some of them. So those watching on Zoom can use the Q&A box, and those on Facebook can use the comments. While we're waiting for some questions, I have a few to start. Can you please talk a little bit about your parents and their background and what you know about their lives before you were born?
My parents came from Krakow, which was Poland, which was, my father came first from Krakow when he was 18 or 19 years old, came to Paris to study. He wanted to study threads, how to manufacture threads, and this is what he did. He graduated with this certificate or whatever diploma that he had, and he made a living manufacturing threads, who became later on pieces of cloth. And my mother was from Krakow too. They were in the same neighborhood. And my mother came later on with my father to Paris after they got married. My father was a very strict father, but very loving. And we lived in a very, how can I say, not regimented, but we knew what to do and what not to do. And my mother was not human, I don't think. She was an angel. She was so good. She was an angel. And family was very important. My father was taking care of many people in our family. We had a beautiful life in Paris. It was, living in France was wonderful. And all the children were born in Paris. Does that answer your question, Michael, a little bit?
Thank you so much. And you mentioned that you had a wonderful life in Paris. What are just some things you remember about those first 5 years of your life?
Well, I remember that we had, first of all, we had the Shabbat dinners and the family dinners, and the having always the family over, or we were going to, members of the family, we were going to concerts. Even at a young age, my parents took me to a concert, to the museum. My parents believed in lots of culture. And we were always busy, happy. We were comfortable, and it was just a beautiful life. And then when the war was over, it was totally different because we lost so many people. It was awful.
Thank you for sharing. How did the rest of your immediate family members survive?
Not too many of them survived. They were taken away. They were taken away. There were razzias all the time. My parents couldn't help them because they didn't know where they were. So a lot of them were just picked up, like my mother's sister, the first sister, the oldest sister. Her husband was walking to the grocery store, and he was picked up, and he never came home. All this was because we were wearing those Stars of David, and people would see us in the street, looked at us, and this person is Jewish. You know, it was just to degrade us. We were labeled. So a lot of people were just picked up and never came back. And my parents survived only because of this wonderful man who was a friend of my father, who was the chief of police of the area where we lived. And he decided to condemn the house where we lived. And my parents stayed in the house the whole war. And there was no electricity, because if you had the electricity, then the Germans would know. They checked everything, so they would know that somebody is living in that house, and they would probably come and destroy everything, including the people who lived there. So that man was among the righteous people who being I mean, he took his life in his hands, and in his family too. Because if he was caught doing what he was doing for my parents, he would have been shot in a minute. So that's what it was.
Thank you for sharing. Your brothers who survived, how did they survive?
Well, they were in the French underground. So they were, their job was to blow up the trains with the ammunitions, the trains that came from Germany with ammunitions. They blew them up over the mountains, the Alps and all that. And they were the underground. They were fighting the Germans.
After the war ended and you went back, you were reunited with your family. Do you remember discussing this ever with your parents and brothers? Did you ever talk about it together?
No. No, I heard my parents talk among themselves about different things that were happening to my brothers, how they survived, how they had to be very cautious in the work that they were doing for the underground. But I never even talked to my mother. Asked me many times if the lady that was taking care of me, the nun, was the mother superior, was nice, and I said yes, and I share with her moments that we had together. But with my father couldn't talk to me about it, because when I started to tell him something, my father was very emotional about it. I was his baby, I was a little girl, and he started to cry, so I wouldn't talk to him about it.
Thank you. So I was going to ask if you think that had to do with the fact that you were so young and that you were only about 10 years old and your brothers were older. So maybe they could talk to your parents more, but it was harder for them, you think, to talk to you being the youngest.
Yeah, my parents knew everything from my brothers. I know that because many times they were talking and I was not supposed to be in the room. So, and I wasn't curious to know what it was. So I had a nanny at one time, and she used to take me to the park, and I'm sure that they discussed everything then at the time.
Thank you. Did you ever find out how your brother was able to get the German uniform?
I spoke to him about it. I spoke to him about it once. I said, how did you get the uniform? And he says, we won't talk about that. So I just assumed that, in my little head at the time, I was thinking he went to the wardrobe and just took a uniform, but that was not it, my little head. The reality is probably that, being in the underground, he must have taken maybe the uniform of somebody who was dead. I didn't ask him. And the only thing was that I never talked to him about thanking him except one time. I didn't know how to thank him for saving my life. And when I was an adult, when I was married and had a grandson already, I was in his office in Paris. He was an art dealer, and I was sitting across from him at his desk. And I said to him, I said, I never thanked you for saving my life. And he looked up and he was writing something, and he looked up at me and he said, I would die for you. You're my sister. You don't have to thank me. That same brother passed away 7 years ago. Tomorrow I have your side for him. But he was an angel.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you please explain what yard site is for some of the audience members who might not be familiar with that, and what you do in this time of year?
Well, in our religion, we light a candle for the year of the person who was gone. So we light a candle every year, and we say prayers. And we remember by lighting the candle lights for 24 hours. So it's a nice thing to do. It brings us back to reality. I feel that we're not here forever, and the ones who are gone, we have to remember them because they were such a big part of our lives. And for our holidays, sometimes I buy those little candles, the memorial candles. I buy them by the box because, unfortunately, for the high holidays, I have my kitchen counter full of candles, remembering my family, the members of my family and friends.
Thank you. And you've said before that you light a candle every day for your older brother who was murdered in Auschwitz.
Now, that was my youngest brother.
Your youngest brother.
Yeah, every day.
So you light a candle for him every day.
Every day. And if I am not home, I put a little electric light.
Thank you for sharing. What happened to Nicole?
Well, Nicole she went to Canada, and she married a Canadian. I think he was in medicine also, and she became an oral surgeon. She had 2 children, and we were in contact until she passed away 4 years ago. She was so grateful to my family for saving her life, because my father paid for everything, but my father didn't even he never met her. He never met her. It was he always said that you save one life, you save the world. So he saved her. There was no question in his mind that she should go with me and she should be saved. Even though she was not a Jewish child, she was just a child.
Thank you for sharing. Can you please share some of the impressions that you had of Drancy and what it was like there, and how long you were there?
3 months. I was there 3 months. I think it took 3 months for my brother to find me, to make sure that it would be a success. Well, you're never sure until it happens, but he did succeed. It was dirty. The odors were horrible. People were crying. People were sick. There were elderly people. And it was not an environment for anyone to be in. And the food was, my son has 2, my children have 2 dogs. I wouldn't give the food to the dogs. It was barely edible. The atmosphere was very somber. You know, the days were long, the nights were even longer. Didn't sleep well at night, so sometimes you dozed off during the day, and consequently the nights were even longer. The next night was even longer. It wasn't a place for people to be, really. It wasn't.
Thank you for sharing. We have a good question here. Do you remember how your neighbors reacted to you coming home and back to the neighborhood? And did you go back to the same home where you had lived before this happened?
Oh, sure, yeah. And well, in our street, we had only good people. Everybody was so happy when they saw my parents coming out, and they didn't know that they were in hiding in the house because the food was brought in at night on the black market through this man who, the chief of police. So they didn't know that somebody was living in the house. It was very well done with navy blue papers on the windows so you couldn't see the daylight, I mean the lights, if there was some candle lights or something. And there were I don't know, like hurricanes, what do you call them? You know, things that you take for camping.
Oh, like a tent or?
No, you know, the lights.
Oh, like a lantern or
The
something.
lantern, yeah, the lantern. They had things like this and candles too. And many years after the war, I was teasing my dad, and I was saying to him, actually, you had a romantic life with mommy because you had candles. He thought it was pretty cute what I said, but at the time, I'm sure he didn't like it. But my friends were just like before, and we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about the war. No. But there were a lot of people who were anti-Semitic, but they didn't show it. But we knew who they were, you know, but they didn't do anything to us. My father had a very good reputation as a righteous person, who did business the right way and all that. So there was nothing against my parents.
Thank you. And that actually leads to another question we have. Did you, so you mentioned you didn't talk to your friends about your experiences afterwards. Did you ever seek any sort of therapy for the trauma that you went through?
Never. Never. The thing I think that really saved my mind was my upbringing, my religion, because I was talking in my mind, I was talking to God like he was right there, and that he was going to help me, like he was a person. And I felt very close to God, and it secured me in a way. But I never had therapy or anything. None of our members of the family had therapy, because I think that what saved my parents, that my mother didn't go out of her mind when she heard that her son was taken to Auschwitz. You know, I don't even know how she did it to survive that. Me being a mother myself now. But I think that it was her faith and the faith of my father that saved them. And I know that I have friends who were during the war in hiding and all this, who came back after the war and lost complete belief in the religion of any kind, but I didn't.
Thank you. And that was actually one of the questions we had as well about your faith. Do you know how your parents' health was after being in hiding for these years? Do you know they had any health problems from?
My mother did. My father didn't, but my mother had bronchitis for the rest of her life. She had chronic bronchitis. It came back periodically, and she had to go into the mountains on a vacation and stuff like that. But no, my father was very strong. My mother was the one that was a little bit more sensitive. But my father lived a long life. He was 91 when he passed, and my mother was 87. So they had good years after the war.
Thank you. What is your attitude today towards Germany or German people? I know that might be a complex question, but what do you think?
I don't buy anything German. I cannot buy anything German. I don't condemn the people who are today, the young people. It's not their fault, but I still have not hate, but I would think I have very strong bad feelings about Germany, because I still at this time in my life, I still question myself many times. And when I talk with some of my friends, whether they were survivors or not, I'm trying to understand, and I still can't understand, that a country like Germany, who was so civilized, so educated, how they could do what they did, that they succumbed to Hitler and the atrocities that Hitler made them do, and they did it. I don't understand it until this day, because I am not a saint, but the other day, for example, outside of the building where I live, there was a cockroach on the ground, and I picked it up with a leaf and put him in a place where he could be safe and not be killed by somebody stepping on him. So I do not understand that somebody can kill somebody and hurt somebody. I can't understand that. I can't grasp it. And when you think that a civilized country like Germany put people in concentration camps, put them in the ovens to burn them, to kill them, the atrocities they took. I knew of a mother who was in Bergen-Belsen, and the Germans took her 2 children and threw them against the wall, 2 babies. And I said to this woman, your heart didn't stop beating? You saw your 2 children being a blood spot on the wall? I mean, the atrocities that they came up with is beyond your imagination. They took, I hope that there isn't young people listening to this, but they took pregnant women and raped them to see how long the pregnancy would last after so many people raped that particular person. You have to be a monster to dream up these things. How can you hurt people like that? For nothing. We never did anything to them. We never hurt them. Just because, and I politically, I am very upset when I think about it. The Pope in Rome at the time could have helped a lot if he would have said the right thing in his speech, that we did not kill Jesus Christ, that we did not take the blood of Jesus and all this. It would have been another story. I really believe that. As I grew up and later on, I realized what was going on. But I would never go to Germany, never. Many times they have asked me to go to Germany, to the concentration camps. The March of the Living, I said, then you have to buy me a one-way ticket because I know I won't come back. I would probably drop dead in Auschwitz when I see when my brother and my family was taken. I can't understand how they did that. So why would I go to Germany? Why would I don't blame the young people for anything. I just don't want to be in contact with. I don't speak German anymore. I don't like the sound of it because I heard them talk. When I was taken away, they were not talking, they were barking. The way they were treating us like we were less than inhumans. And this is not acceptable. How can I ever forgive that? How can I forgive people who have killed my family?
Thank you for sharing this. We have about 2 more questions, and then I have some more that we'll use to conclude. Do you have any fears that stem from these years?
Fears like what?
Anything that maybe reminds you of your time in the Holocaust years?
No, I don't. No.
And do you or have you ever had dreams about this time in your life?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did, but I don't anymore. But my husband, my late husband, used to, the first 4 or 5 years of our marriage, he would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, sitting in bed screaming. It was scary because I didn't know what to do. And then as the years went by, he didn't do that anymore. But he was in Bergen-Belsen. As a child, he was 13. You can imagine, 13 years old, taking a child to Bergen-Belsen.
Michele, I've heard you speak several times throughout the last couple of years. Something that's always stood out to me about your story is how closely knit your family was before the Holocaust and after the Holocaust. Can you talk
My
about—
mother did a good job. My mother said, I can still see my mother, blessed memory. She was always, the 3 boys were standing and I was the little one. And she would say, remember, you one for all and all for one. And she said to the boys, remember when you crossed the street, and they were maybe 15, 16 years old, hold on to each other while you're crossing the street. I remember that very vividly. And if one of my brothers had something and the other brother didn't, and he wanted to wear it or whatever, there was no question. He took off from his shirt, he says, here, you wear it. It was the upbringing of my parents were fantastic. And I tried to do the same for my children, for my son, and I think I did a good job because he's quite a nice person.
Thank you. And I know you were the youngest. Your brothers were older than you, and I know you enjoyed playing with them when you were a child.
Yeah.
I remember the story you told me about following your brother. Would you like to share that with the audience?
Oh, my middle brother David, who came to this country and brought me here. David was a fabulous dancer, and he taught me how to dance because my dad also was a very good dancer. So I was always following him. I was saying, where are you going? What are you doing? Why did you talk to this? I wanted to know everything. So he got pretty annoyed with me one day, and we were in the living room in our house, in the living room, and he said to me, and whatever he said to me, I did immediately. He said to me, go in the dining room and see if I'm there. And I ran. And in the middle of my running, I said, how can you be there if you are here? If you are in one room. But he wanted to get rid of me for 5 minutes because I was getting a little bit of a pest, wanted to know, why did you do this? Why did you talk to him? What did he say? I wanted to know everything. Because 3 brothers, I didn't have a little sister. The brothers were sticking with each other because they were 18 months apart. So they were very, very close.
Thank you. And again, it's something that's always stood out to me about your story, just how close your family was before the Holocaust and after the Holocaust. I know you all.
After the Holocaust, it was the same. I mean, I used to go back to Paris, and I would walk with my oldest brother, and he would meet somebody, he would introduce me, he would say, this is my baby sister. I was 50, 60 years old at the time. This is my baby sister. And he would hug me and kiss me like I was a little girl, I was still the baby. I was very fortunate to have such a nice family. And I'm grateful for it.
Thank you. You speak on a regular basis, particularly to high school students.
Yes.
What is something that you like to leave them with? And I'll preface this to the audience by saying I ask this for all of our speakers actually, but when Michele will speak to a group of high school students, I ask her, what would you like them to take away from learning your story? And what is that message that you have for them?
Well, I always tell them the same thing. I say, before I finish my talk, before I say goodbye to them, because I love talking to them because they pay attention, and I have a feeling that I make an impact on them, which is the whole idea of doing this thing. So I say to them, they ask me that question too sometimes. I said, if what you heard me say today would be something that would honor me personally, is that if you see somebody doing something wrong, and you know that it is wrong, for example, somebody is teasing somebody else for no reason in a negative way, speak up. Don't turn your head, speak up. Because if you do not speak up and help that person who is in a distress situation, as little as it is, or a big distress situation, you are as bad as the predator, because you allow him to go on, the predator, in being nasty to another human being. So it is your job to speak up and defend that person and take care of that person for the moment. And when I say that to them, the majority of the time, they all applaud because they agree with it. This has happened in the museum many times in the class. And I think this is the only message that I can give them. I feel that very strongly, that you have to speak up. I had an experience many, many years ago, or maybe 20 years ago. I was on the corner of a street and my knee gave in. And I was just gonna cross to go to the other side of the street, and my knee gave in and I fell. And I fell with my legs onto the street and the rest of my body on the sidewalk. And nobody helped me to get up. And there were people walking around, and until I said, please help me get up. And one man came over, a young man came over and helped me. And the reason I didn't understand why they didn't help me, because another person said to me, they're afraid that you're going to sue them. And I thought that this was so foreign. You have to help somebody else. If you see somebody in distress, you have to help them. I couldn't walk away if I see somebody is, and I think everybody's instinct is to help somebody.
Well, thank you so much again. And I think that's a perfect segue to read a couple of comments from our people who are watching. Somebody says, thank you for sharing your story. I learned a lot more about what happened in Nazi Germany, hearing it from you. Thank you. God bless you and your family. And another commenter said, you are a role model for character and ethical humanity.
Oh, thank you so much. This is so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michele, for everything you do for not only for our museum, but for our future by sharing this story on such a regular basis. We appreciate you and everything that you do for us and for our world.
Thank you, Michael, so much.
I would also like to let everybody know our museum is now open in a limited capacity, so you can make reservations on our website and see how you can come and see the museum in person. But for the time being, our programs are still virtual. We wish everybody a happy, healthy, and safe weekend ahead. And Michele, thank you again so much.
You're welcome.
Shabbat Shalom, and have a nice upcoming new year. We will have a talk on Friday as well. And then after that, our talks will move to back to Thursdays for the end of summer. But thank you everybody for your attention, for listening, for watching. And Michele, thank you again so much.
You're welcome. Goodbye.